Hi there, and welcome to Flip the Script Season 2, Episode 9. When you lose an AE mid-sales cycle, 5 ways to seamlessly swap in another rep without losing any traction. My name is Beck Holland. I'm the CEO and founder of Flip the Script. Before we jump in, if you do me a teensy favor, go to flipthescript.co and download the deck so you can follow along at each step of the way. Once you've done that, let's go ahead and jump in. So let's start with a bit of an agenda. There's going to be 5 different pieces to today's agenda. Number 1, choose the best AE, where you're going to want to select the AE that you want on the account. Number 2, identify the key stakeholders in the process. Number 3, do research. Number 4, making contact, how to make contact with a prospect that you want to re-engage, in the sales cycle that's already currently going. And number 5, we're going to talk about adding value to that contact who is hopefully the decision maker. So let's start off with how can you choose the best AE for the deal. So I've seen a litany of different things that people consider whenever they're choosing an account executive. And where I get really nervous is when people are choosing an account executive because to make things fair internally. Where they're saying like, oh, okay, like this is the only key consideration. We're not even considering who would be the best AE for the deal. So the things that I consider, I like to consider both. Number 1, start with who is the AE internally that has the most connections to that account, because that can help, with conversion rate of is the deal likely to close because they already have some internal traction. Number 2, who is the best fit for that team in terms of selling style. So I can think top of mind of a deal where we had an account executive churn, and the selling style of this particular company was not only very complex, but they also really liked people who were less aggressive and less pushy. So we started evaluating who would be the best account executive based on that criterion, and who we knew who, just typically was properly aggressive, but not overly like, I'm going to send you 15 emails. Number 3, who is the account executive that knows the account in terms of the industry or the segment? So a lot of different account executives, because they worked in cybersecurity, for instance, I'm thinking of my friend Nick, he worked in cybersecurity before. So whenever he went over to Vendition and started selling a lot of recruiting software, recruiting process, he basically liked selling to cybersecurity companies because he knew them so well. So is there an account executive internally that has sold into this segment and very well in their past life? Number 4, who is the account executive that covers that segment? And then number 5, who is the account executive who has worked that account in the past? So again, these are all variables you want to think about. I would argue that numbers 1 through 3 are really where I like to lie for the lion's share of my time, always considering of making it quote unquote fair. But what makes it fair for your organization is the one who has the best chance of converting the deal. So you always want to consider that at least as part of the equation. It's not only like who owned the account beforehand, but for instance, if they owned the account beforehand and they weren't able to convert it into a deal, it doesn't necessarily mean that they should have the ownership of that deal if the new account executive churned, because they weren't able to obviously make the deal happen. So I never would be so boisterous as to say that you shouldn't consider as number 4 and 5, but I would just say number 1 through 3 that I would really heavily think about what's best for the prospect, because what's best for the prospect is ultimately what's best for the deal. So when I think that through and I say, okay, let's say a rep, Ross, has churned, and now John is the new rep that's going to be on deck. And so, John, I took a good hard look at him, and he knows a lot of the people over at, let's say, Drift, for instance. He knows a lot of people over at Drift. He really fits their selling style. He knows hyper-growth companies. He knows really cool, fast-moving companies that are logical. He also has sold into chat box software in the past or video software in the past. And so we picked John. John is our rep. So now what John needs to start with doing is identifying the decision maker and the other key players in the process. So not every exit is super cut and dry. I don't know if I'm going to be the only one to call this out, but it's not like every single departure of an employee ends with a mutual handshake and understanding that it's not a fit anymore, where everyone's on good terms. A lot of the times it ends very abruptly, and it ends because of, reasons of they weren't a fit and we had to churn the rep. So in this case scenario, you aren't exactly necessarily going to have the leverage to be able to call that rep back and be like, hey, you know that account drift? Like, who are you working with and who is the decision maker? So in some case scenarios, whether we like it or not, unfortunately, that information is lost with the rep that churned. So again, the rep that we churned was Ross. John doesn't know who the decision maker or the other key players are necessarily. And so how can he do that quickly? So I would identify all of the stakeholders within the project. And when I say all of them, I mean all of them. So I'd start with identifying who the key decision maker is, identifying who the champions are. You know, I see a lot of people talk about decision makers, but all of these other people of influence within the org can really make the deal happen. So I have very rarely only relied on a decision maker, but like I want to learn how to make this a valuable and successful project for all these other people involved. So John wants to identify who the decision maker is, who are the champions in the process, who are the influencers within the process, who is the original, what was the original source of the opportunity? Was this an inbound? Was this an outbound? Was this a postbound of like a content download or a webinar registrant? But how can I understand, you know, like internally, did someone pass us over? Was this a referral lead? Was this someone a leader that, you know, knew internally? Or was this someone that, you know, Ross, the rep that churned, was it a contact of his? But you want to understand what was the genesis of the original meeting? Anyone involved in valuation, I would say if you have anyone that's in that room, they're important. So you need to figure out who they are within the process. I mean, enterprise strategic, you can have upwards of a room of 20, 30 people who are involved in this kind of process, especially during COVID when people are thinking about, is a purchase worth it from a fiscal perspective? Like you have a CFO involved, you have finance team involved. So who are the people that are involved in that process from the ground up? And then I also, number 6, I would hate to be the bearer of bad news, but groundswell matters. So those little quote unquote guys or girls, they also matter within the org. So people who are using the product, people who have used that product in the past. I've also seen a opportunity be sourced from groundswell. So whenever I was selling back, when I was an account executive, an SDR, and an SDR leader, a lot of times I would do training for different reps and they would ask how they could help me. And I'm like, don't worry about it. Like, I love doing it, etc. They would insist. And I'd say, well, since we're on it, I need to talk to this person. Can you get me a meeting with this person? And regardless of whether it was in their department or not, they would multi-thread around and they would go find that person. So groundswellers matters. So I would understand for this account, what are the people that fit into each one of these 6 categories? I think a phone rang, but we're still going to record. Number 3, do your research. So now that John is the person that we have selected, John has understood who are all the key people that are involved, all the way from groundswell up to decision maker. Step number 3 is John needs to do his research. So these are the things that I would research if I were John. Number 1, start from the top down. I would research the account. I would research the process that they had been through, the stakeholders, which we covered in the last point, the decision maker's profile, the interaction with the competitor. Is this a competitive deal? Do we know anything about that? Are they intermixed mutual connections with anyone from my chief competitor? How many meetings have already happened? The content of those meetings. So hopefully you have some kind of conversation intelligence software like Chorus that you can understand what has happened up to date. The source of the original opportunity, was it inbound, outbound, all bound? Was it a referral? Was it something from the C-suite? Was it a buyer intent lead, etc.? The promises that we made to the prospects and the pain points they're looking to solve. So arguably lists 6 through 10 is where my heart starts to swell of these are the things that I would want to know. But if I'm coming into any situation, I am a very, very low key in terms of public facing detective. I want to know everything about that person before I walk in the room. Regardless of whether it's an interview, regardless of whether this is someone you're, looking to prospect into, or whether this is a new boss that you're about to meet, or whether this is someone who just transferred into your org, more data, the better. So I always, by code, if I'm walking into a meeting and I don't know the person, I'm usually looking up their LinkedIn profile and I'm trying to figure out what kinds of companies have they worked for, How long? What have they done? Have these companies been acquired? Where did they go to school? Where do they live? Like, I want to know as much data as possible. So in terms of having an AE swap into this high risk situation of someone churned and now they're trying to slip in and close the deal, you want to basically double or triple the amount of research that you normally would have done, which should still be high, because you are walking into a situation that you don't know what's going on. So you want to give yourself the best chance, best shot on goal that you can close this deal. So you want to start, it seems kind of different that you would start by, not only talking to all the people involved, not just the decision maker, but you want to start with knowing everything that you can possibly under this sun know about this account, without actually talking to someone directly. So this is the time where I would, maybe it's a little inappropriate term, but I'd go like full ex-girlfriend stalker profile, on this person of like, understand like, where are they living? What are they doing? What's their bank account number? Like, you want to know data, not that I've done any of this, but you want to know data about what's going on in the situation so you have the best chance possible to close the deal. Number 4, making contact with your person, a point of entry, or I call him a PO, not Edgar Allan Poe, but a point of entry. So now you have all this information. You're the rep that's been chosen. You know all the key decision makers. You know the ground swellers. You know the champions and the influencers. You know everything that you can about the account, what's been said to date, what promises have been made, what are the pain points, what are they looking to solve for, and are they evaluating you against a competitor? What does it look like whenever I send that first email or that first point of contact to the person that I'm sending it to? So I certainly don't have the temerity to tell you where to enter. Sometimes it's going to be a decision maker. Sometimes the decision maker is like, look, I'm just the one that signs on the dotted line, but someone else is the one that needs to do all the vetting. Regardless of who it is, I would have go through 7 steps to reach out to that point of entry. So let's start at the top. Number 1, I would pattern interrupt. So you are not only a salesperson, you are a salesperson after they've already had a salesperson. So you're at an odds in terms of where you're at, especially if you're selling competitively. So when you're selling competitively, they probably have a team where the person has remained the same. So whether they're good or bad or not, it's been one face on the deal. And it's not a great sign to someone who is being sold into that the rep churned mid-cycle. So you need to, again, double, triple your efforts of what you normally do. So I'd pattern interrupt right off the bat and say, hey, I bet you wanted let's say the new point of entry that their name is Luke. Hi, Luke. What I bet you really wanted in this process was more sales reps blasting with emails trying to get your business, right? So you want to call out something that you're about to do and say, like, enter into their experience, conveying that you're self-aware, that they probably don't want to have another salesperson and certainly not someone who's sending in some emails. So you want to, pattern interrupt here right off the bat to kind of break the ice, appear human, diffuse the situation, but also enter the door. Number 2, I would prove my research on the account. So I would say, it looks like you've had 5 meetings so far with us on trying to find the best vendor, but more importantly, so I'd give them a little splice of what the background has been with the account, not because they don't know, but because you want to prove to them that you know. You want to prove to them that you're not running in just trying to close a deal, that you actually have done your homework on what's happened to date. But you want to say, but more importantly, and you want to, in step 3, research on the person and make it personalized to them. More importantly, I saw you wrote this article on LinkedIn about effective cold outreach, and I loved where you said, if it doesn't scale, it means nothing. Brilliant stuff. So not only have you pattern interrupt right off the bat, you've come in and proven to this person, your point of entry, that you have done your homework, you know what's going on in the deal, but that's not the most important thing. The most important thing is them. You saw they wrote this article on LinkedIn that was really interesting. And always be real. Like, if you don't find it interesting, I'm not saying that you should fake it, but I am saying that if you're in sales and you aren't doing research on your prospects and aren't finding interest in their work, you're probably in the wrong profession. You need to be someone who's a detective and who is falling in love with your prospects and your prospects' business, because you're going to have the long-term goal of making their life easier. So if the heart and the mindset isn't there, then the action's never going to flow out. So I would say in this case scenario, you need to find something that they did that you found really interesting and compliment them on that and be specific with the line. So I saw you wrote this article on LinkedIn about effective cold outreach and love where you said, if it doesn't scale, it means nothing. Brilliant stuff. Number 4, you want to strike them with a little bit of self-awareness. Say, I know you don't owe me this, because they don't. Number 5, you want to pattern interrupt and self-awareness. You say, but if you can stomach one more meeting, because you realize that people don't love meetings, especially with salespeople and especially for vendors. But if you can stomach one more meeting. 6, you want to give a pain point that you have heard in the process because you've done your research. I'd like to meet you and hear more about when you mention in meeting 2 about not knowing how your reps are pitching pricing to make sure we address that. So you want to convey to them, you're telling them 2 things here. Not only do I know your research, know who you are in your account and know who you are in specific, I know that you mentioned in meeting number 2 that you had a pain point, and I want to be sure that we're not just jamming software at you, that we are aiming to understand more about this pain point and make sure that we address this with this purchase, because your buyers are not buying software because they like buying software for fun. They are buying your software because they have a pain point, and you need to figure out what that is and how can your software alleviate it, and how can you get as many details as possible so you know how to alleviate that pain point for them or solve for that pain point for them, and also solve for it, throughout the selling process to come. Number 7, you want to do what I call the push-pull technique. If you want more on this, if you go to Silver Bullet Central, episode 1, I talk all about the push-pull technique, but always on the back end of my emails, I like to give a little reprieve to my buyer to make them, understand that either way that I really value them. So either way, thanks for giving us a shot so far. I hope you're staying safe with everything going on, and let me know if I can be of any support during the process. And then number 8, you're going to finish off with a killer value add. So every email that you send, every call that you make, etc., you need to always seek to add value to your prospects. Value, value, value. You want to be aggressive about something, be aggressive about the type of value that you add and the level of value that you add at each stage of the game, so that your prospect would have to be nuts not to buy from you because you've added so much value to their day. So I'd say, P.S., I thought you might like this, and I would attach some kind of content, webinar, article, something that's really meaningful to them that they would like, so that you are proving to them, not only are you self-aware, have you done your research and you want to hear more about their pain point and listen to them, but you also want to add value on something that you thought, that they might enjoy. So their first interaction with you, they're understanding like, oh, okay, bet you wanted to, what you wanted in this process was more sales reps trying to send you a bunch of emails to get your business, right? So you're pattern interrupting. Not only is this person self-aware, it looks like you've had 5 meetings with us so far on trying to find the best vendor. More importantly, I saw you wrote this article on LinkedIn about effective cold outreach and loved where you said, if it doesn't scale, it means nothing. Brilliant stuff. So not only is this person someone who's self-aware, this is someone who has researched on who I am. I know you don't owe me this, another piece of self-awareness, but if you can stomach one more meeting, another piece of self-awareness. I like to meet you and hear more about when you mention in meeting 2 about not knowing how your reps are pitching to make sure we address that. You are number 3, after my own good. You have researched, you're self-aware, and you know what I'm after, and so you're there to solve it with your product. Either way, thanks for giving us a shot so far. Hope you're staying safe and sound. So you're after my own good with what's called the Snowball Snuggie. If you want to go to Silver Bullet session number 4, I believe, I talk all about the Snowball Snuggie in depth, but you're basically giving them the flavor that you're after their own good and their advocacy, whether they buy for you or not. So not only that, but also, even if I don't buy from you and give you this meeting or anything, I still got a piece of value. You gave me an article. So it's a really good intertwining of flavors that, like, all things being equal, I want to buy from this person. So let's briefly touch on how you can add some value to your point of entry, and then we'll close out for this session. Number 1, I would say just TLDR, the theme is how you add value is make it about them. So give them some piece of value. These are the rules to adding value that I usually put on the reps that I work with, but it needs to be something that you can do without them, without you involved as a salesperson. They can do at home without you there. They can do in their sweatpants in their bed on a Friday morning. It's free, low investment time-wise for them. There's no gotcha or something that's tied to you at the end, and it's personalized and something that they want. That's probably the most key, is that it's something that they actually want. So I think about these rules and say, like, when I'm picking out value, it's typically going to be within 9 different buckets of things that I'm thinking about. If you want to hear more on this, I think it's session 8 within season 2, where I talk about the different pieces of value you can add. But you can send over relevant content, send over ideas to make things better, know what's going on in their world, assist them with some kind of pain point that doesn't necessarily have to do with your product. Send over a direct mail package that has to do with them that they really want. Make them aware of a potential threat that they didn't know about, so you're really being in their corner and looking out for them. Give them a network connection, give them a referral of some kind of business that they would actually want, so maybe you can close some deals for them. Or number 9, introduce them to some level of community that they would probably enjoy. So those are the 9 different pieces of value that I usually seek to add. But I'm not saying it's an exhaustive list. I'm sure there are other ways that you can add value, but those are the ones that I typically do. And again, always just be thinking of, like, is this something they could do without me? Is it free? Is it low involvement time-wise to them? Is there some kind of gotcha on the end? Or is it really no really hiccup on the back end where there is something in it for you and that it's personalized to them and something that they want? So in summary, I know that swapping in an account executive during a cycle, whenever maybe something hasn't gone that well, is super, super difficult to pivot. However, it's super easy if you're after the right things. So just like the knight walked up to the stone and freed the sword, if you are the rep that's coming in and saying, like, I want to understand as much as I can about this situation, and I'm going to do as much research as I can, and I'm going to seek to sell through value add, then this is actually going to become a situation where not only do they see the difference between you and your competitors by the way that you're selling, they see the difference between you and the first rep. And so it's a really refreshing way for them to say, like, somehow, not only do I not see this as a bad thing that an account executive got switched out mid-cycle, I see it as a really good thing, that now I have this AE who's really going to take care of me, knows what I'm doing, knows what my goals are, and is after my own good. So that is it, everybody. Thanks so much for watching. If you like this session and just didn't get enough of me, be sure to go to flipthescript.co and you can see other sales sessions just like this one. And if you really like this session, be sure to go to Flip the Script on LinkedIn, tag us in your top 2 takeaways so I know you want to hear more of. Either way, I hope you have a great rest of your day. Watch out.